The laughter hit him before the food did, sharp and careless, bouncing off the polished walls of the restaurant like something thrown without looking. It was the kind of laughter that didn't know it was cruel, the kind that forgot there were human beings standing in its path. An old man stood frozen near the center of the room, tray trembling in his hands, eyes lowered, while the mocking rippled outward. No one noticed the way his shoulders stiffened, or how his breath caught, or how something far heavier than a tray was about to hit the entire restaurant. Before the story truly begins, let me ask you something from the heart. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that we never really know what someone has survived, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. Small actions matter more than we realize. The old man's name was Walter Thompson, and at 78 years old, he had learned how to take up as little space as possible. He wore a faded brown jacket that had seen too many winters and shoes that squeaked softly against the tile floor, announcing his presence even when he wished they wouldn't. The restaurant was one of those modern American diners just outside of Columbus, Ohio, all glass and chrome, buzzing with lunchtime energy. Business people filled booths, college students laughed over burgers, and families scrolled on their phones while waiting for orders. It was loud, confident, and young. Walter did not belong to that world anymore, and everyone seemed to know it. He had come in because hunger has a way of pushing pride aside. His Social Security check had arrived late that month, and the pantry in his small rented room was down to canned beans and dry bread. The sign on the door said weekday specials, and he had counted his crumpled bills twice before stepping inside. When the young server, a man named Trevor, with sharp hair and tired eyes, had told him to grab a tray and move along the line, Walter nodded and obeyed. He always obeyed. Years of factory work and silent suffering had taught him that resistance only made things harder. As Walter moved slowly, his hands shook. Arthritis made even simple movements feel like lifting weights underwater. He tried to hurry, feeling the eyes on his back, sensing impatience in the air. Then it happened. A plastic cup slid on the tray, tipped by accident, and spilled across the counter. It was a small thing, barely a splash, but it stopped everything. The laughter came next. A group of young men at a nearby table snorted and pointed, exaggerating his slowness with mocking gestures. Phones tilted, capturing something they thought was harmless entertainment. Someone muttered that old people shouldn't be allowed out alone. Walter's face burned. He bent to clean the spill, his hands clumsy, his back screaming in protest. The weight of embarrassment pressed down harder than hunger ever had. What no one in that room could see was the life folded inside him. They couldn't see the decades he spent working 12-hour shifts in a steel plant in Pennsylvania, or the way his lungs still ached from years of dust and smoke. They couldn't see his wife, Margaret, who had died quietly in a hospital bed 5 years earlier, her hand slipping from his as machines hummed on. They couldn't see the nights he sat alone, speaking to an empty chair just to remember what her voice sounded like. What they also couldn't see was the envelope folded carefully inside his jacket. Inside it were documents he had reviewed that morning, his hands shaking for a very different reason. After nearly 30 years of fighting a corporation that had denied responsibility for toxic exposure at his workplace, a class-action lawsuit had finally been settled. Walter hadn't told anyone. Not his church, not the shelter volunteers who checked on him. He didn't trust good news anymore. But the settlement was real. By the end of the week, he would receive compensation large enough to change his life completely. Money couldn't bring Margaret back, but it could finally bring rest. As the laughter continued, something inside Walter shifted. Not anger, not bitterness, but a deep, aching clarity. He straightened slowly, ignoring the pain in his spine, and looked around the restaurant. He saw exhaustion on faces pretending to be amused. He saw young servers running on minimum wage and caffeine. He saw families sitting together but barely speaking. He saw a world moving too fast to notice who it was leaving behind. He walked to the counter and paid for his meal, his hands steady now. Then, instead of leaving, he asked to speak to the manager. The room buzzed with curiosity. some expecting a complaint, others expecting a scene. The manager, a woman named Susan Reynolds with practical glasses and a tight schedule, came forward, clearly bracing herself. Walter didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone. He simply asked if he could do something unusual. He explained that he had spent most of his life invisible, that he understood how easy it was to laugh instead of look closer. Then he told her he wanted to pay for every meal in the restaurant, every table, every order, not as a gesture of pride, but as a reminder. Silence fell in waves. People looked at him, then at each other, then at the manager. Susan hesitated, thinking it was a joke, until Walter placed the envelope on the counter and explained enough to make it clear he was serious. The register rang. Once, twice, again and again, the sound echoing through the room like a heartbeat. Faces shifted from amusement to confusion to something like shame. The young men who had laughed the loudest sat still, their smiles gone. Trevor, the server, felt his throat tighten as he watched Walter carefully count and sign, his hands no longer shaking. Susan's eyes filled, not from the money, but from the quiet dignity of the man standing before her. Walter asked for one more thing. He asked that the remaining food in the kitchen be packed and delivered to a nearby homeless shelter where he sometimes volunteered. He didn't say which one. He didn't want recognition. He wanted the impact to travel without his name attached to it. As people stood and left, many approached him, awkward and humbled. Some thanked him. Some apologized without words, heads bowed. Walter nodded to each of them, offering small smiles that carried a lifetime of restraint. The laughter was gone, replaced by something heavier and far more meaningful. If this story is touching something inside you right now, if you feel that quiet pull in your chest, please pause for a second to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Stories like this only travel when hearts help carry them. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in years. Walter sat on a bench and ate his meal slowly, savoring not just the taste, but the stillness. He thought of Margaret and imagined telling her what had happened, imagined her gentle smile and the way she always believed people were better than they acted. For the first time since her passing, the loneliness didn't feel so sharp. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. Let it be honest. Walter didn't change the world that day. He didn't erase cruelty or teach everyone a permanent lesson. But for a moment, in a crowded restaurant in the United States, he reminded a room full of strangers that kindness carries weight, that dignity is not measured by age or clothing, and that sometimes the thing that hits us the hardest is not a fall, or a mistake, or a laugh at someone else's expense, but the quiet grace of a person who chose compassion when bitterness would have been easier. And long after the tables were cleared and the laughter forgotten, that impact lingered, heavy and unforgettable, in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it.